Om Gana Timanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunalitamina Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So thanks everyone for joining. This is my first time giving an all Zoom class, and Madhupan's behind the doors there. So hopefully I can say something relevant and that you get at least one takeaway. And if not, then at least we chanted a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So yeah, I think most of you, maybe with the exception of James, knows the pastime of Ajamil already, and we've been having so many classes here about it. But yeah, this whole pastime of Ajamil really shows of chanting Krishna's names. Even the point made in this part of the Bhagavatam is even if those names are chanted without full knowledge of their effect or power. And I was thinking of that part in the CC. I can't remember the Leela or where it is, but where Srila Prabhupada is explaining in some of the purports that when the Mohammedans, the Muslims, are saying haram and they're getting benefit just because the name Ram is in there. And there's so many words nowadays. I mean, New Zealand's like a pretty crazy example of outside of Wellington, there's this road or suburb called, it's like it has an N and then it's Gorunga. And I was so shocked the first time I saw that. I was like, what? What is that? Is it some devotee community or something like that? And yeah, they have there's one town named Rama, I think, or something like that. But even here in the US as well, there's so many words with the name Ram, Cinerama. There's probably other words too. But yeah, the point is that even if people are saying these words and even they're not even saying the word isolated, Krish or Rama, it's within another word and still they're getting benefit. And then Prabhupada explains, I can't remember if it's in the CC or in the Bhagavatam, that even if the holy name is chanted, um, jokingly or even like mocking the devotees, still those people are getting benefit. So it's amazing how powerful the holy name is. And then whenever we actually have knowledge or at least hear about the power then of the holy name, then we derive more and more benefit. So that's also the importance of hearing pastimes like this. So just in the context of this chapter and the verses that we've been discussing, Prabhupada makes the point in today's verse and purport that Ajamil, he had a son at a very old age. I think it said, was it the verse before that it was saying that he was 88. He had, in text 23, it says, "My dear king, while he thus spent his time in abominable sinful activities to maintain his family of many sons, 88 years of his life passed by. And he had 10 sons, of whom the youngest was a baby named Narayan." Well, so I guess it doesn't say if he was having kids up into his old age, like, past 50, 60, like that. But basically, at this time, according to Vedic culture, he should have, around the age of 50, just been starting to gear into like giving up family life and practicing more austerities of Vanaprastha. But instead, he's still trying to enjoy, and keep squeezing pleasure out of the material world and his material body, even up to the age of 88 years and beyond that. And this is so prevalent, like we can see that in a material society that people have children as their body gets old. People have children, and then they start to live vicariously through their children, especially, well, even when the children are young. But then, as the kids get older, finishing high school, or whatever they do, getting jobs, and the parents are really living through them. They have in their mind sort of a plan chalked out for that child, what success looks like. I'm sure many devotees have probably can relate to that and could probably, yeah, have experience that once you start to do something and not according to sort of the plan that maybe you personally had in mind before, had maybe shared with family and friends, and then you start practicing bhakti, or of course, there's many different ways to practice bhakti, but let's say you know, stop working, move into the ashram, or even, yeah, once you finish your studies or stop studying or whatever you do, move into the ashram, your whole life changes. And then they're like, oh, what are what are you doing? They don't, a lot of times they don't see it with as much respect, or they just think like, what are you have time, you're not doing anything, you're not working hard. They should just come to Gita Nagari and see. Um, but yeah, so the point being that the parents live vicariously through the children, and then the children get older, and then the parents expect grandchildren because, and I've heard this one is me just saw me explain this, that you can see like the grandparents are living vicariously through the grandchildren as well, because their bodies are old and they can't enjoy like that anymore. So they're watching these children be able to enjoy with their youthful bodies, and in that way they derive some pleasure as well. So Ajamil is like this, he keeps having children and he keeps trying to enjoy not only his body, but perhaps, vicariously through them as well. But really in this age, past 50, that according to the Vedic literature, that this is the perks of this time are actually that you've been through family life, you've been through your senses roaring in your teens and 20s, and then slowly the senses, if you do things properly, then the senses start to calm down and are more subdued, and then it's easier for you to just focus on your spiritual life. Jamil was not following this process. But nowadays, if the senses do start to become more subdued in old age, people actually see that as a disadvantage. They want to, again, ramp up their senses um, by things like, I mean, a pretty like gross example is like Viagra, things like that. And then, or just more, I guess, common day-to-day examples is, they can't wait to retire early. So many people are trying to make plans. How can I retire by the age of 55 or earlier so that then I can just go on enjoying, go on vacation, do what I want, that, and just constantly occupy yourself to make yourself help forget about impending death and how your body's deteriorating. I was just reading, I've been reading the 12th canto again, and it's speaking about how, in one purport, it's very straightforward, how people don't even take care of, like children don't even take care of elderly people anymore. They just send them away to old age homes. And the disciples of Srila Prabhupada say where they waste the last years of their life playing games like golf and shuffleboard. And I forget what else they said, but it was funny. But it's true. It's true, and we know from Bhagavad Gita that you can't be inactive. People think they're going to retire and then they'll be able to relax and chill out, but the senses don't work like that. They don't agree to your program. They just keep pushing, pushing, pushing. And so, you know, you have to engage in activity. So many people retire, even like, let's say, I've known quite a few people that were in the military and then they get to retire young. I don't know exactly how that works, but let's say they retire by the age of 40, but then they don't know what to do with themselves. So then they'll start another business or something like that. Or yeah, they have to be engaged. Essentially, they end up getting a second job. And this time, well, it's fine because I don't have to worry so much about making money to provide for myself. But they're taking on, similar anxieties just because you can't remain inactive. So yeah, and also nowadays we can see that many people actually around this age of 50, when the kids leave home, they go to university or, you know, get married or move across the globe or whatever they do, that many people at this time then have midlife crises because they don't know they don't know what to do, and especially divorce is so common at this time because the kids were really keeping them together. I mean, that is like becoming less and less common. Like, you know, the kids would actually want us to be happy, so therefore we should get divorced. But even 10 years ago, I think more of the common narrative was let's stay together for the kids. And then the kids leave, and then the couple is again, left with each other. And it's back to this dissatisfaction. Of course, I'm speaking about material relationships. I'm not speaking about devotees. So just a disclaimer for what I'm talking about. But then, yeah, so a lot of times they get divorced, but then again, because their senses haven't been purified and they didn't go through family life according to the Vedic way to inspire like a natural and healthy detachment, then they start up again with a whole string of other partners, and then the divorce rate just increases with each partner, and they're increasingly dissatisfied. So yeah, just this is pretty much the reality nowadays, and Ajamil is another example, of course, not as crazy as in today's society, but he's another example of um, just keep on ramping up the senses, keep going with these material things that don't prepare for spiritual realization. So going back to also just the whole point of this pastime, the importance of chanting and how powerful the holy name is. And I was thinking that, and I've also heard His Holiness Devamrita Swami say this, that we just don't fully trust, or at least speaking for myself, that chanting Hare Krishna will solve all of our problems. So basically, because we've been let down by matter time and time again, or even other people in a material relationship time and time again, we ascribe those material limitations to the mantra. So we think, oh, it's subtly, oh, the mantra is also material. It's not going to be able to solve all my problems. Um, yeah, because perhaps we don't have sufficient experience yet. I mean, coming to that level of trusting the mantra is like a lifetime career, but we don't have, or I don't have sufficient experience yet of the spiritual reality. I've only been living most of my life and millions of lifetimes in the material quote unquote reality that has let us down lifetime after lifetime, and that's why we keep coming back and coming back and coming back. But the mantra is Krishna himself, and it's spiritual, so it has the ability to take us to a whole other platform of consciousness, the fourth level of consciousness. So Krishna comes as his name, and this can also be very baffling because, materially we see my name, for example, is different than me, Dinapalika Devi Dasi. If you were to just go into the other room and say that, that doesn't mean I'm there in the room with you. But Krishna's name is different because Krishna's name is different because Krishna and his name are non-different. So somebody could argue, oh, well, how could God, Krishna, come as a name? Like, why doesn't he just appear right before me? But why can't that would also be prescribing a limitation on how God chooses to appear? He's not being guided by our senses. Actually, he's Rishikesh. He is the director of our senses. So I really like this point of like, how many limitations conventional religion or outside of religion um, prescribes to God to try to keep him, within their grip, essentially. And I love all these pastimes. I mean, of course, all the time, again, Christian is the same as his name. But then also, I really like um, all the pastimes of Krishna whenever he is interacting with his other incarnations, or yeah, like for example, I was just listening to the pastime, the Krishna book narration of, I think it's the 89th chapter of the Krishna book, where Arjuna and Krishna go is it Dvashvetadvip, where they meet Mahavishnu, and and Mahavishnu was saying, oh, he just wanted to see them. He just wanted to see Krishna and Arjuna. And I just always, even the first time I read that, I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like basically God is there with his other form as God. And even it's even more interesting because a lot of times, especially with like a pseudo-Christian background, that God is like super grandiose and the controller of the universe, and so we often think like, for example, okay, well, he should be more like how the universal form is described in Bhagavad Gita, or even the pictures of the universal form. And even when I'm reading the second canto for the first time, I was like, wow, finally, like this is God, where it's explaining like he's the mountains and this and that and the other. I was like, yeah, that's totally God. But then, you keep reading the Bhagavatam and you're like, oh no, actually, it's much deeper. Krishna himself, as Swami Bhagavan, he's just enjoying. I remember David Marita Swami also said here a couple of years ago when we had Mantra Lunch had a retreat here, and he was saying he often makes this point, but why does Krishna carry a flute? And it's to show he's all play and no work. So even you could say Mahavishnu, in a sense, has some kind of work to do, but Krishna, as the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, doesn't. He's just enjoying. But yeah, I always like these pastimes where sort of the two Krishnas kind of come together. And then I was also just reading with Parmeshwari and Nagari the pastime. I think it's in Madhya Leader 18, Lord Chaitanya's pastimes out of Vrindavan, where Lord Chaitanya and the Gopal deity, because Lord Chaitanya wants to see the Gopal deity that's on the top of Govardhan Hill, but he doesn't want to step on Govardhan Hill because he sees it's so different from Krishna. It is Krishna. So then the Gopal deity comes down and then goes to a temple. Lord Chaitanya visits the temple, and then Lord ends up walking with the Gopal deity back. Maybe it's back to Govardhan Hill. I can't remember where they're walking back to. But I also just love that too, that Lord Chaitanya, he's walking with the deity of Krishna. So yeah, so many times, people think the common narrative nowadays is that seeing is believing, but actually we know from reading and just practice Krishna consciousness that actually it's not that seeing is believing, but that hearing is actually experiencing. And so, the common argument, or even we can feel subtly that, I can't see Krishna, but because he's non-different from his name, we can directly experience him through sound vibration. And furthermore, hearing is like a deficient experience. That it's not the real substance, it's not the real proof. But we believe so many things just based on hearing, so many things that we've never seen, that we just pretty much blindly accept. Like, we don't look at the sun and just think, oh, well, you shouldn't look at the sun, but directly, but we don't look at the sun and just think, um, oh, that's just a half a meter disc in the like whitish disc in the sky. I mean, if you were just going based on seeing is believing, then that would be your reality. But we know from authorities that the sun is massive, it's a big ball of fire, etc., etc. And yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about how light particles work. I don't know about anything about physics behind atoms and all that kind of stuff, or how the cells in my bodies work. But I have faith from what I've heard from authorities that, they work in such and such a way. And I kind of just trust that, these other people know how it works and how it's going on. So that's good enough for me. Yeah, so even another example is that we can't feel the earth spinning, or like spinning. I guess we're spinning with it. Underneath us, it's going at like 18,000 miles or something an hour. I don't know that. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But we just accept. We've been told by authorities, so we just accept, oh yeah, that's true. So, yeah, one thing that's actually interesting about reading the Vedic texts is that, some things, especially the first time you start reading, could be very challenging to accept. Even some things for devotees have been practicing a long time, it's hard to accept. So, whenever Bhagavatam's talking about the heavenly planets, or just that there's like extraterrestrial beings, essentially. There's lower planets, there's reptilian planets, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Then beyond that, there's each universe is covered in layer after layer, each one, what is it, like 10 times bigger than the next. So whenever we read that in Bhagavatam for the first or subsequent times, it can be really hard to accept. But one thing that one devotee shared with me that I had heard in a class when I was living in Atlanta, is that, we kind of can accept things step by step. So, for example, you start reading Bhagavad Gita, a little bit of Srimad Bhagavatam, and you try to apply the process. So it says, okay, we should chant Hare Krishna, you'll feel happy, you'll feel, some relief from material life. And that's pretty much focused on, at least most of us at first, not really, I mean, maybe some like, oh, I want to connect with Krishna. Mainly, most people are looking for relief. So you do that, you experience it, and after a certain point of applying that practice, you start to feel like, wow, it's right. Like I feel different. I feel more peaceful or relief or whatever it might be. And then your faith grows. And then you read Bhagavatam and Prabhupada saying all different kinds of things in the purports about material life and how the material world works, and um, different aspects of material life. And then you start to also, coupled with the chanting, you have more spiritual intelligence. Then that starts, your vision changes and you start to be able to see that, and you're like, wow, hey, actually this guy writing these books is actually right. Like I can accept that. So little by little you start to accept, and it's like, well, if you can accept these things, and the Bhagavatam is so unlike any other literature out there. So if you can accept these things about bhakti and the Bhagavatam and just the nature of this universe and beyond, not too hard to then be like, okay, maybe the other things that the Bhagavatam says that aren't, don't exactly tally with my sense perception might also be true, because these other things have proven to be true as well. So maybe I can accept, what Prabhupada is saying about the heavenly planets, and then beyond that, like the spiritual world. So I just think that that's, yeah, kind of a nice point. Take it step by step. And also another disclaimer is that in bhakti we don't completely deny the utility of direct experience. I mean, I just gave those examples, right? Of we apply, we enter the bhakti laboratory and apply chanting Hare Krishna. We see the results for ourselves. Tasting prasadam, as always, nobody has doubts about that. We might not be able to put full faith. Sorry, that was loud for everybody. We might not be able to put full faith in the mantra, but whenever you take prasadam, we're full faith. We'll just pop it in the mouth, like don't even think. And I was like, man, I wish I could chant Hare Krishna like that. Just don't even think. Just like experience it. Just here. In the same way that we take prasad, we're just like, I'm not going to think about anything else. I'm just going to taste this prasad right now. But so yeah, we don't deny in bhakti, we don't deny that there is utility in experience, but there's also three different ways of acquiring knowledge according to the Vedic understanding. Is pratyaksha, so that's direct experience, and then anuman is inference, and then shabda is hearing from authority. So yeah, but but it is also the contamination of Kali Yuga that increasingly we just rely more and more on imperfect senses to understand the universe, understand ourselves, trying to understand God, if that's even on our radar actually, which is also becoming less and less. But I guess you could say God, like, what is the purpose of life? Who am I, etc. And we depend less and less on authorized sources, also because we've been let down so many times, again, by authorized sources, whether just in personal close relations or in if we had some kind of religious background. But yeah, we have to rely on our senses. We have to rely on our senses. That's the only truth. And everyone thinks that by advancing in this way, like this empirical kind of paradigm of scientific advancement, that we're actually nearing perfection. And we're getting, yeah, we're getting closer to evolving and perfecting the human species or coming to some realization. Actually closer and closer to by doing that, by just relying on our senses, we're coming closer and closer to living lives completely devoid of meaning and completely purposeless, and just having a life based on absolutely nothing except just raw sense gratification, because that's what it boils down to, the senses and how we perceive things, even this universe. And then at the end of the day, it's also the senses and how I'm going to get um, the purpose in my life, the pleasure, the gratification, um, and there's nothing beyond that. And that's why Prabhupada says, it's animal life. So in this way, if we keep, going down this path, that more and more humans just become a parasite on the earth, because they're just also, as Devamrita Swami often point, that we're the only species that destroys its own habitat. And even like, Prabhupada says it's animal life, but even the animals don't destroy their own habitat and completely decimate the earth. And even I was talking to one guy about this. I think we were coming back from the New York Rath Yatra, and we stopped in I forget what the grocery stores here are called. I don't think it was a Weiss, but anyway, it was something big like that. And it was one of the this old guy that all the carts. And talking about this, and he was so into it, and he was just immediately receptive. And um, I was saying, this point that we're the only species that destroys its own habitat. And I gave him a book, and he was going to give me a donation, and he had all these pictures of like Jesus and different kind of prophets in his wallet. So he really liked what I was saying, and we were getting super philosophical, and I'm like, wow, this guy just gets it. And then so I gave him the book, took his money, and then we went in, got some kombucha, came back out, and then immediately it's like all that philosophy for him just went out the window. And this guy must have been like 70. And he yelled from across the parking lot, he's like, "Hey, are you single?" And I was like, wow, that's just like what it boils down to at the end of the day. And that happened to me also at like during the Ratha Yatra, that I met this guy who wanted books. I was not doing books at the Ratha Yatra, full disclaimer, we were not allowed, but this opportunity just arose near the car. And the same thing, he was so philosophically like inclined, and I was telling him all about living in an ashram. He had so many questions about Hare Krishnas for me, and he was so receptive, gave him the books, and he was like, yeah, I'm trying to work on myself. I'm also taking a break from relationships. Basically, I'm living in an ashram. And then after all that, he was like, so do you like, well, can we go on a date? And I was like, oh no, like I just explained to you my whole life. Like I'm not doing that. And then he was like, oh, well, I guess I can wait, like whenever and I'm like, we just had this whole like really deep philosophical talk, but that's what he was interested in at the end of the day. So it just really, anyway, I'm telling you these stories because it just really showed me, like, that happened 3 times that day. And I was like, what vibe am I on? What am I doing wrong? And also just that, you can talk to people all about philosophy all you want in Kali Yuga, but at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is the interest in sense gratification. Yeah, so even in Kali Yuga, like man, philosophy as traditionally known, even over the past couple hundred years, is completely going out the window. There's no more Plato's, there's no more Socrates, there's not even any more Marx's and Jung's and, you know, all the guys like that. It's just really, if you look at modern day philosophers, and I did some research, basically what it boils down to is how to grow economically while trying to stop the world from imploding. So they come up with solutions like euthanasia, all things like that, that basically how to not stop economic growth, but also like how do we deal with the problem of we don't have enough resources. Yeah. I mean, pretty much it's like a systematic destruction of Brahminical culture. Nobody's studying philosophy anymore because there's no money in it. And so even promoting a culture of, quote unquote, traditional morals and ethics that have been prominent over the past couple hundred years, that even that's not being supported. We're just going deeper and deeper into ignorance. So yeah, like, I mean, I'm just going to kind of summarize what else I had. But basically, like I said before, sense gratification is the moral code, and money means sense gratification. So basically, the moral code is money, which is predicted in the 12th canto about Kali Yuga. And that's obvious. I mean, that's true nowadays. What the 12th canto is saying is true in the fact that multinational corporations are worth more than even entire countries now. Like, I was astonished that Apple, like well, everybody knows Apple, the company, is worth two Mexicos. Like they're worth it. I was astonished at that. And like Alphabet, which is kind of the umbrella over Google and some other things too, is worth more than Russia. Home Depot is worth more than Malaysia. And yeah, I was just thinking, like, of course, these countries, they sell out their culture, they sell out their land, they sell out their, you know, all kinds of like traditional or like indigenous cultures, languages, things like that. They just sell it out um, because these countries aren't even worth as much as the companies. So naturally, yeah, they'll just sell out because money is the moral code at the end of the day. So maybe I've sufficiently freaked everyone out by now. If you can't tell, I am a pessimist, but there is hope. Um, so in the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 11, Text 3, Prabhupada says, this sound of the Lord is identical with the Lord, as we have tried to explain by the non-dual position of the Lord. The material existence of our present status is full of fear. Out of the four problems of material existence, namely the food problem, the shelter problem, the fear problem, and the mating problem, the fear problem gives us more trouble than the others. We are always fearful due to our ignorance of the next problem. The whole material existence is full of problems, and thus the fear problem is always prominent. This is due to our association with the illusory energy of the Lord, known as Maya, or external energy. Yet all fear is vanished as soon as there is a sound of the Lord, represented by his holy name, as it was sounded by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the following 16 words. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We can take advantage of these sounds and be free from all threatening problems of material existence. So that's the Kali Yuga silver lining. That's why great sages and saints worship Kali Yuga, because we have, of course, the Hare Krishna mantra is always accessible in other yugas as well, but it's our only hope in Kali Yuga and our only shelter. So yeah, Krishna, he does things his way. He can come as his name. He can do whatever he wants. I mean, the material nature is real. It's like just clay, like putty in his hand. He can shape it. He can do whatever he wants. And this is, we can really see Krishna's personal intervention in manipulation of his energy, specifically in the lives of devotees, and how Krishna protects his devotees spiritually. Like he says in Srimad Bhagavatam to Arjuna, that my devotee is never vanquished. That doesn't mean that nothing, materially or externally bad won't ever happen to a devotee, but that their spiritual life will be preserved. So yeah, as devotees, I'm sure everybody has kind of their story and what challenges and things they've had to overcome in their bhakti practice. And it really helps at that time when we're experiencing these things or in the aftermath, to have the association of mature devotees and that can help us see Krishna's hand in the situation. Otherwise, we can start to think, oh, why I'm trying so hard. Why is Krishna doing this to me? Even our peers, even juniors can, just somebody removed from the situation can see, oh, this is Krishna's hand. It's just hard when we're in it and in like to see, how Krishna is doing things. But then a lot of times in hindsight, hindsight is 2020. So years later, we can look back and see. And that was reminding me of that verse, Tatena Kampam Susamikshana Punjana Eva Akritam Vipakam Pradibhagva Purvir Namaste something Sadaya Bhak. I can't remember the last line. But yeah, what if a devotee patiently experiences their karmic reactions all the while continuing to practice bhakti, liberation has become their rightful claim. That's a summary, very short summary of that verse. But anything can be tolerated in good association. And I've really come to value over the past couple of years just surrounding myself with very positive devotees, especially as association has, not kind of living in smaller groups anymore, like I did at the beginning of my bhakti. But once you live in larger community, you really have to start to choose your association, who you want to surround yourself with. And enthusiastic, positive devotees are amazing. All devotees are amazing, but again, just choose. Water seeks its own level, so whatever level you want to be with. And yeah, devotees, we may not always agree with them. We may have clashes just due to our material conditioning, but at the end of the day, they are family and we need them. Yeah, we do. So I'm just thinking if I want to say anything else or just stop here for comments. Yeah, just one last point is that devotees are another glorious point about the devotees is that they're so kind and non-envious. And something at least I've become acutely aware of is that material relations, whether that be whatever, past, family or friends, like past friends, or if you're, working a job day to day or going to university or whatever you're doing, that you're in association with those who aren't practicing bhakti, that there's just this way that they just try to really squeeze sense gratification out of you, like wring you like a wet towel, to just try to squeeze like their enjoyment out of you and kind of, just use you for their sense gratification. Even if it's subtle, it might not be such like an obvious way. But this becomes very apparent whenever, let's say, you are in association with non-devotees for a while, and then you come back into the association for devotees, and it's just such a relief. Like you can just finally relax because devotees aren't gonna, they're not gonna try to squeeze you and wring you like a towel to get something out of you. They're just, we're here to support each other spiritually and lift each other up, actually. So I just wanted to end on this quote by Srila Prabhupada in a letter. I don't usually quote Prabhupada letters because they can be taken out of context, but it's quite like a general philosophical point. He wrote to Janavadasi in 1973. Prabhupada says, I'll give the context after actually. In the sun, there is great heat and light, and by reflecting the greatness of the sun's light, the moon in night also appears great. Actually, the moon is by nature dark and cold, but in association with sun, it has become accepted as great. Hence, by association of the great, one appears great. So this can be related to our association with the spiritual master, and this was the context Prabhupada was giving this analogy, the quote in, is Janavadasi was glorifying him in her letter, and then Prabhupada was saying, he was giving this analogy and saying in his very humble way that, he only looks great because he's reflecting the light of his spiritual master. But this can also be applied to the devotees around us, that, we don't really have much ability actually on our own, but we can reflect their greatness in us and learn so many things from them. So yeah, by all of your association, I hope to be able to, while I'm here, to do a little something of value. If I can even reflect a little bit of the light of your greatness. So if anybody has any comments or corrections or questions, please unmute. Or if not, I like try to balance all the comments and everything. So if not, yeah, I'm gonna just end here. Thank you all. Hare Krishna. Antarashino Bhagavatam Ki Jai.